So last session ended a bit early for everybody, and so as a result, I thought it best to do another little text adventure for everybody in order to make up for it. As you know, last week Tarak decided to go and investigate his old family farm, and so here's what happened in the Discord as it ties into next session. The entire party, minus Caius for now, was about 400 feet away from Kostanach Farm and Tarak's old family home. Time had certainly taken its toll on the old building, but the architecture was unmistakable. A number of field workers could be seen, walking through the fields, picking crops, and doing day work next to a somewhat run-down looking farmhouse. His family was nowhere to be seen. For now. What does the party do? Yuzjin. This is the place? Tarak looked around, taking in the sights and smell before sighing with a slight nod. This is it. I never realized you grew up on a farm as well. I remember this place, faintly, spoke Vasriel, delivering the tools for you and Robert. Tarak, I swear I mentioned it in Thistletop, but yes, I haven't picked up a farm tool in almost a decade now, I admit. But this was home. I can relate. I've been gone for a long time. I'm sorry you had to change home so often. Tarak looked around, taking note of all the farmhands. Seems the old man hired help after I left. That's surprising. But he takes a deep breath, a hand to his chest. We should ask around, see if the owner is anywhere on the property. Hardy looked around on the outskirts of the property as the laborers picked up the last of the late harvest. A few pumpkins could be seen being loaded onto a cart by some of the farm hands, while others were in the middle of cleaning up the property. A slight chill could be felt in the air that seemed to keep the farm hands motivated to finish their work before the first snowfall of the year. Should I be looking around for another half-orc or a human? Tarak. Human. He should have dark hair, though it may have grayed a bit in the last few years. He's rather short compared to me, about 5'5". That might be something. Robert Constash, or Farmer Bob, as people joked. All right, spoke Eusgen. I'll keep an eye out. The cleric nodded before leading his way onto the property, heading for the farmhand that was less busy, giving a small wave to draw attention. The party spotted a local farmhand currently in the process of loading pumpkins onto a large wagon. Oh, you guys are looking for old Bob? Didn't realize we had any deliveries today, sorry. Tarak. Apologies. It's not a delivery. Bob is a relative, you see, and I was hoping to speak with him. Tarak had a sheepish look on his face as he spoke. The worker looked at him a bit funny. I'm not really seeing the family resemblance. Old Bob's up at the main building. Emily's probably making him breakfast right around now. It's a strange situation, yes, spoke Tarak, but he is my father, so. He paused a bit. Right, yes. Thank you. And Emily, is she new to the farm? Son? Didn't know old Bob had a son. And nope, Emily's been here since they married. Eusgen. Married? Not too surprising, to be honest. Aye, they tied the knot about a decade ago. She's given him two so far. Over a decade? Spoke Eusgen, looking towards Tarak. Isabella's 9 and little Emily's around 6, though you wouldn't know it just by looking at 'em. Tarak frowned, his face twisting a bit in an almost distraught manner. I see. That's good news. The main farm, you said? Yeah, the old building up on the hill. It's the big Chan-looking place. Can't miss it. Right, thank you. Yes. Tarak looked to the others. I guess we should go over? Right, spoke Eusgen. Walking over to Tarak, he asked, I thought it was less than a decade. Tarak, I guess that he wed after I left. I don't really know anything that happened after I left a decade ago. The party walked over to the main building. It was a large, thatched roof building that didn't look too out of place in the rest of the buildings around here. It had an overhang, a number of farm tools stashed next to it, and a few glass windows, preferring curtains. Yuzjin, well, let's see him. There were a number of entrances, including one at the front and the back. From inside, they heard the sound of boiling water, construction, and two women talking, followed by a loud yell. Tarak froze up at the yell before booking it to the door and knocking loudly at it with a look of instinctual panic from the shout. Did you want to do it yourself? Spoke Yusjin. Just tell us if you need to be alone. Tarak looked over, still with a panicked look. Support is welcome. Tarak ran over to the door and knocked frantically at it, but he noticed that his hand was not making any noise. After a moment, he felt that his hand was not making contact with wood, but in fact cloth. This person had curtains for doors. Tarak paused and took a deep breath to try and calm himself, a bit shaken. Curtains, not doors. Another change? Tarak sighed and swallowed a lump before pushing the curtains aside a bit and calling inside. Hello? Looking inside, the interior of the house was a more traditional Asian style, with thin wooden walls, mats instead of chairs, kettles and boiled water, and much more open space. It felt much more natural and organic than the in-rooms and caves the party had been cooped up inside recently. From inside, however, despite its renovations, Tarak recognized the layout of the house in an instant. He could hear the chirping of birds, the low hum from the rest of the farm, the sounds of cooking, and perhaps most notable, given that it was mid-morning, the bubbling of warm tea. Dominic was home. At least he was home mentally. This was definitely the house that he grew up in, floor plan wise. Whether the current owners would recognize Tarak as such was another matter entirely. As he called out through the building, a loud, burly voice that was unmistakably Tarak's father called out, "Emily! One of the workers is at the door! Answer it!" Yusjin looked around. Pretty? Tarak nodded, looking around. It is, yes, not what I recall, but it's been some time. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair, slightly disheveling his braids. This is not what I expected. A few moments later, a woman answered the door. She stood around 5'8" and looked to be of Tian ancestry, just like a Mako. But she was topless, and though she held one of her hands in front of her to cover her modesty. She wore a grass skirt and dancer's pants, though the expression on her face showed exhaustion. But despite this, she still smiled as she opened the door. The smile turned to confusion as she opened the door. "What? Oh!" she spoke as she recognized you. The Sentinels! "Ah!" spoke Yusjin. "The name spread faster than I anticipated." Tarak averted his gaze a bit, with a slight darkening of his cheeks. Yes, that's us. Apologize for intruding. I take it you're Emily?" She nods, though she does not seem as embarrassed as one might expect a half-naked woman to be at 10 in the morning. "That's what everyone around here calls me. Is there a problem?" No, no, none," spoke Tarak. "I was hoping to speak to Robert Constash. I have a bit of old matter I wanted to speak to him about." "My husband? Of course, I was just making him tea at the moment. Forgive me, we don't usually have guests during tea time. Follow me, please." Yusjin watched Tarak for a moment, waiting for his first step. Tarak nodded, swallowing a lump of coal. Yes, of course." He took a step inside, his breathing almost shaky. The two of them walked into the house, following Emily towards the family kitchen. The first thing that Tarak noticed was the bottles. Lots of bottles. Rum, mostly, but also bottles of more traditional Eastern alcohol, mostly sake, that littered the floor. Far more than even him or Rygar should drink in a day. The dates on the bottles were inconsistent, but it appeared that someone had been attempting to clear them up at one point, but eventually just stopped. Inside the kitchen were two figures, one standing and one sitting. The standing figure was a young-looking human, no more than 9 or 10 years old. She stood on a stool next to the kitchen, and was currently in the process of clearing a massive pile of utensils, chopsticks, forks, plates, and other dishes. Perhaps most notably about her, however, was the short fox's tail that popped out to the back of the young girl's dress, and reached down almost, but not quite touching the ground. Next to her, sitting on the ground, was a red-tailed fox that looked up at the dishwashing girl with a look of adoration on the fox's face. The man sitting in the center of the kitchen was much more of a proper human, though he was much fatter than last you saw him. A double-sized glass of rum sat next to him, as his hand seemed to rather hold the bottle itself, guzzling it down like a potion, despite the early hour. He was unshaven, and there was a fairly nice bowl of hot, steaming soup in his lap. A bowl that he immediately overturned as he stood up, spilling the soup over the rather stained carpet floor towards Emily, as the three of you walked in, before one of his fat hands landed on Emily's chest, as he began to grope his wife openly in front of you. Emily did not resist. "Who the hell are these guys?" he asked. "Tax collectors?" Emily looked towards the two of them, but seemed afraid of speaking. "Not exactly," spoke Eustace. Tarak gulped audibly, grasping his holy symbol. I'm a member of the Sentinels, Tarak Ember, but he takes a deep breath before bringing his hand over to his hair, changing it with his minor magic spell briefly to the short, shaggy look that he showed the rest of the group in Thistletop. "You may know me by the name you gave me. Dominic." The older man frowned, confused. "Dominic?" He spoke, confused. Then, as if a light suddenly went off in his head, he looked Tarak in the eyes. "Dominic!" he spoke before raising his fist and throwing his full glass full of beer in Tarak's general direction as he yelled, "Dominic!" A beer mug then slapped and smashed Tarak straight in the face. Not enough to shatter, but enough to smack him in the face and soak his hair and face in cheap rum. "Dominic! That fucker who ran off with the very gods who cursed my existence, who ruined my fucking life! That Dominic?" Eustace threw his hands up. "Whoa! You alright, man?" "Alright? Fuck you, I'm not alright! This fucker!" he pointed at Tarak. "Fuck you!" The young girl near the sink finished up the dishes, and, scooping the fox, walked over to behind Eustace. "Bad idea," she spoke. "He gets like this when he's drunk." Eustace raised his hand through his hair, looking at Tarak. Tarak just stood there quiet for a moment, before returning his hair to the previous mohawk braid, and dried himself before sighing. "Yes, it's me. I apologize for the intrusion. I wanted to talk with you, but seems this is a bad time." Your words washed over the angry man like water over plastic, not affecting him in a single bit. "You and your gods ruined my life!" he screamed, as he picked up more beer bottles to throw at him. "You ruined my harvest, my luck, my children! Ever since you left, you cursed this family, and now you return to curse us more! My children are foxes! Foxes!" Tarak simply moved a bit to get between the others and the farmer, to prevent them from accidentally being hit, frowning a bit as he glanced down at the fox. "I had nothing to do with this, but if you want to take your anger out on somebody, I'll take it. I certainly earned it." He swings at Tarak. Emily simply gasps as the nearly 50-year-old human seems to go berserk with a look of concern in her eyes, as did the small fox being held by the young girl next to Eustace. The older sibling simply sighed and shook her head. Yuzjin actually wins initiative. He attempts to separate the two of them. He grabs the man, pushes him into place. His swing does not connect as the two of them seem to connect in a hug of sorts. Tarak doesn't move much other than to grab Yuzjin's shoulder. "It's fine. This is on me for his anger. Father, I came to try and make amends for the past, and seeing them, I see that there is trouble to handle. And if you blame me for it, that's fine. Eustace let him strike me as he wishes." Eustace clears his throat and backs off. The man swings a drunken fist at Tarak. Bang! As he decks him. "You ruined my life!" Tarak shifts his jaw a bit and looks down at him. "Is that all? I can take a beating, father. If you wish to strike me, you could do it harder than that. Take out your anger on me, old man, and we can talk about this when you're settled." He crosses his arm and looks sternly down. And so, as a swift action, Robert flexed his arms, causing them to lengthen and sprout feathers. Robert's eyes enlarged as he grit his teeth at Tarak, alcoholic rage on his face, his stoic expression and lack of reaction doing little to quell Robert's anger. "You and that priest ruined my life," he yelled, "with your divine curses." As a full round action, Robert wound up for a large punch. It aimed it squarely at Tarak's chest. As he did so, his fist appeared to glow magically, as flames engulfed Robert's arm, but not the flames of Sarenrae. a much more primal, animalistic flame that seemed to engulf his fist as he punched forward. Falcon Punch! Tarak then gets slammed in the face for a whole bunch of damage, flying back 20 feet into a nearby wooden wall, totally shattering it. Emily gasps and, grabbing the two young foxes, quickly began carrying them away from the brawl. Caius suddenly showed up. Need a hand, bro? Tarak grunts, coughing a bit of blood and waving the hand away a bit. Thank you, Caius, but this is something that has needed to happen for almost 10 years now. Listen, you're gonna kill your own son, spoke Yuzjin. Chill. Caius, I can sympathize with daddy issues, but at least defend yourself. Caius stepped between Tarak and his father. I don't think I'm gonna let you do that again, sir. I think it's best you calm down. He took a defensive stance. Tarak got up and stabilized himself against the wall, putting a hand to his chest as he cast Cure Moderate Wounds on himself. Feel better, old man? Get it out of your system? Now sit down and let's talk peacefully like adults, because Ray, damn it, act like one now. Yuzjin grunts. Caius looked back at Tarak, noticing his resolve. Step back. Uh, Robert screamed and once again drunkenly punched the wall behind Tarak, missing. Yuzjin, at this time, decides to cast Hypnotism. Suddenly, a giant multicolored psychedelic spiral appeared on the floor behind Robert, causing him to slowly turn around and stare directly at that spiral, ignoring Tarak entirely. Caius nodded towards Yuzjin in approval. We should bind him before the effect wears off, as I think we could use a little extra in this case, as he pulled out his Gelaxian rope. Vasily, mind giving me a hand? Yuzjin uses a Pearl of Power to retrieve his hypnotism. Sorry, Tarak, but I didn't want to see you getting beaten up any longer. Vasily hopped into the room and bites on the forehead of the roll. Hoy, sure, he barks. I need the hand for the higher bits, however. Tarak sighed and nodded. It's all right. I admit I was struck harder than I thought he could physically do, but still, that might have done a bit to ease him. Just don't hurt him as you tie his wrists. He is still my father, just drunk. I'm gonna make sure Emily and the girls are okay. Like I said, spoke Caius, I understand why you didn't want us to get involved. Family is difficult. Caius and Vasily then tied Tarek's father up. Yuzjin. Well, keep an eye on him for now. You should talk to them. We'll keep an eye on him for now. You should talk to the family in private. The cleric cleaned himself off a bit, pulling the teddy bear out of his bag, and went to go see Emily and the girls, giving his allies and his friends a solemn smile. Thank you, both of you. Yuzin gave a smile and a thumbs up. Caius gave a slight bow and returned to the tending of the BDSM. Vasily and I will watch over your dad. Maybe talking to the ladies will help explain more of this outburst. I guess, Yuzjin, I guess that means I can come with you if you want to do this alone. Tarak, of course, just be careful. He packed a punch, yes, but he's still rather old. And you can come if you wish. Time to start making amends. And he cast minor magic to create a second teddy bear. Yuzjin, let's get to the bottom of this. The party made their way across the kitchen, careful to avoid the hypnotism spell in the center of the room, as Caius and Vasily tied up Robert. Opening a closet door, they saw Emily, as well as the two younger girls, as well as the one younger girl, still holding a small fox, huddled in the corner. Emily looked at you with fear in her eyes, while the 9-year-old with the foxtail looked up at you defiantly. Tarak gave a soft sigh. I apologize for that. I was expecting a bit of an argument, but not that level of physical violence. Emily continued to cover her breasts out of shame and embarrassment, while the 9-year-old answered your question. Told you it was a bad idea. Dad doesn't like to be bothered, especially by priests. Didn't know what you told him to get him that mad, but he just gets like that sometimes. It's reasonable, in a sense, spoke Tarak. I'm likely the cause of all that anger. From how he reacted, I guess he never told any of you about me. I don't go by the old names anymore, but I'm his son, Dominic Constash. The young fox girl reached out towards you to shake your hand. Isabella, this is my sister Emma, and my mom, Onichi. though Dad says that's too hard to pronounce, so he just renamed her. The half-nude foxwoman bowed slightly towards you. It's great to make your acquaintance, though I wish it was under better circumstances. Tarak gave a slight smile. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm sorry if it did end up like this, but I am happy to meet all three of you. He kneels and hands over the two stuffed bears, just something to make up for the intrusion. Isabella took the two bears in one hand and placed the fox in her other hand on the ground. She waved the bears over the small fox, which looked up at the bears with amazement in its eyes. Then suddenly, over the course of about 6 seconds, the fox suddenly began to grow and morph, losing its fur, though not its tail, as it quickly morphed into the shape of a small human child. Bells! The child spoke, and grabbed towards Nualia's teddy bear with all the warmth and innocence of young childhood, and gave it a deep hug. This is my sister Emma, spoke Isabel. Tarak smiled, careful of his tusks, and nodded. It's wonderful to meet both of you, Emma, Isabella. Take good care of those bears. He stands and looks towards Onichi. Miss Onichi, is it all right to ask about the fox shift? Father said it was a curse by the gods. Onichi looked embarrassed. Oh, that I. Well, not to offend Mr. Dominique, but I'm not sure I can trust you enough to tell you that. I just barely met you, and even my husband doesn't know, just because Sandpoint is a very enclosed place. Tarak nodded, smiling. Tarak is fine. It's what I've gone by for the longest time. And if anyone could understand, I think myself and my fellow Sentinels would be the ones to tell. I'd like to help if I can. If not for him, then, well, for the girls. Since I guess we're siblings. Tarak then rolls a natural fucking 20. Onichi blushes, and out of her hair popped a pair of fox's ears. I'm a kitsune. Tarak cocked his head a bit. Ah, that's not something I see every day. Onichi continued blushing. I met Robert about a decade ago after I came up from Ushiniwa in the south. He seemed unwell, and well, it's a long and complicated story, not something I talk about every day. Ah, damn it. But our troubles started with Isabel. The children can't quite control their transformations yet, and the people of Sandpoint are, well, not to use the word racist, but unwelcoming of outsiders. Isabella looked up at Anichi defiantly. Yes, I can! The young woman suddenly retracted her tail inside of her. Well, not when you were just born, you couldn't. Tarak smiled and gave a small laugh at that. Well, to say I understand that would be an understatement. Myself and Caius both had our share of troubles, well, still even after our work, so the distrust is understandable. But can I say that I'd like to make things better for people, including the three of you? Well, I'm relieved it isn't a curse. I do have to ask, why have you hidden it from my father? Actually, no, I shouldn't be surprised. His distrust stems from my choices after the fight we had. I apologize that you've had to hide it. Onichi gave a weak nod. Tarak put his hand to his chin, playing at the whiskers that he had grown. I'd love to hear about all three of you, and if you ever wish to tell him about this, I'd offer my full support. And if you wish, we have a friend in town you can always speak with, a Mako. Plus, I'm sure the girls would love to meet Kathy and her friend, Fleur. Yusjin. Of course, the suspicion is fine. I'd act the same. However, we're a friendly bunch, so don't worry too much. Uh, Isabella. Well, I'm not sure what you can do, to be honest. Dad hates priests. Bonichi. I think what she's trying to say is that Robert hasn't had the best experience with religion ever since we married. That's part of the reason we've had to hire so many farmhands. The farm produces less than half of what it did 5 years ago. We had Ezekiel come by to bless the fire, come by before the fire to bless our crops, but to no avail. Robert even cut off a lock of Nualia's hair and planted it in the field. Nothing. Then, after all that happened, Emma was born, and we, or rather Robert, decided it was best that we kept the kids inside to prevent them from being targeted. Tarak frowned a bit from all of that, nodding. I see. It is distressing that the farm has gone through trouble like this. I'm not sure of any way I could aid the crop right now, but I imagine there could be a solution somewhere. 5 years ago, Tarak thought to himself, mentally connecting the dots. Yuzjin. Before what fire? Onichi. The cathedral fire that happened 5 years ago. Ah, I haven't been here then. However, what's the correlation between religion and your low crop? I have no idea. Robert is a great farmer. He does everything right. We plant everything correctly. We inspect everything. We hire help. I simply just think he has the worst luck in the world. He's a bit strict with the children and his workers about making sure they do things correctly, but that's about it. Robert is a great man. He's just very easily irritable with everything that's going on with him in his life. And so he blames the gods. The fact that Dominic here left to go join the church doesn't really help much either. Yusjin, have you tried plowing a new field? Dozens of times. It never helps. The rain clouds avoid our farm like the plague, and we've always dealt with the worst of the bugs and pests. So it's just too dry? I suppose. That's why we've hired so many farmhands to water the fields manually. But it just seems that our plants never absorb any of it. Assuming that Mr. Constash here knows all there is to know about farming, spoke Yuzjin, that really only leaves it to luck or a curse. Onichi, we already tried. We had a priest try to decurse our fields. Nothing, and it just fueled Robert's hatred of the deities. Tarak pulled himself from his thoughts and nodded. I'm not entirely sure it isn't a curse, but I feel like luck isn't what's causing this. I can try and do a bit of research to find a way to help you with all of this for you all. It's the least I can do to try and make amends and try to aid your troubles. Any ideas, Tarak? Tarak, I have two. One is the touch of a more malevolent deity that took advantage of the unease between my father and myself to lay his touch upon the land. The other is something that I'm finding a bit of a trend in. Vasriel and Caius will likely both make the same connection once we tell them, but the paladins have handled that. The, the plight should have been handled if that's truly the curse. Tarak leaned over and lowered his voice so that only Yuzjin could hear. An artifact of sorts, a rune well, in under Sandpoint. The paladin should have destroyed it as part of our deal with them, but I suspect it was triggered 5 years ago, and what has led to so much of the excessive malice in Sandpoint, including the fields and Nualia's own rage. Though the mother of monsters also had her hand in this. Yuzjin nodded. I see. I hope that's it. Though we'll definitely want to come back another time in order to double check. I agree. It's something I'd like to try and check about when we get back to Magnamar. There's bound to be some information in there that we can use to aid the farm. All right, so shall we get going, or do you wish to speak to your father again? If he's himself, I'd like to at least let him know that I'm going to try helping this farm. And he smiled, looking to the girls and his sisters. Miss Onichi, if there's anything at all that you need, please don't hesitate to ask. He reached into the pouch on his belt and, pulling out 30 gold coins, handed them over. For now, please make use of this until I can do all that is physically possible for the Sentinels to do to restore the land to its former fertility. Onichi took the money and said, I don't know what you did to him, and why are you helping us? I don't mean to sound ungrateful or anything, I'm just kind of confused. Tarak smiled a bit solemnly. I was a rambunctious youth 10 years ago, eager to learn. But that meant forgetting my chores here on the farm. We said some harsh words to one another, and I left without trying to fix things. I've been through so much, and I want to fix things with the people whom my bridges have burnt down. That includes my father, and by extension, all of you. I would have been here had I not made such poor choices in my past, but they've led me back to my roots. So please, I wish to make some sort of connection with you now that I know all of you. And we shall continue the story next Monday.